Alright, welcome back to Kickin' Crochet. Today I'm going to show you how to do this, I'm calling it an Interloctagon. It's an Interlocking Crochet Octagon. For this project you're going to need 2 colors of worsted weight yarn and a size I crochet hook, and 2 stitch markers. So this is part of a blanket project that I'm working on, so I'm going to give you just kind of a preview. I haven't actually finished this, so it's not sewn together yet. But we're going to have these octagons and then kind of a square in the center to connect them all together. I'm not sure how well you can see that. So each square is surrounded by 4 interloctagons. I just have these held together with stitch markers for now, but you can see kind of what we're doing here. So I'm going to start by showing you the octagon, and then I will show you how to do the center square as well. So I'm super excited about this project. It took me a little while to figure out how to make an interlocking octagon. I'm sure there is more than one way to do it. Okay. So the yarn I'm using is Paintbox Simply Aran, but you can use whatever yarn you'd like. And this hook is a candy shop hook from Furls Crochet, but again, any hook you want is fine as long as it is the right size for your yarn. Alright, so we're going to start with the gray color is what I used for my inside color. So on this pattern, whatever color you start with is the same color you're going to end with. So if you want it to have a darker border, then you're going to want to start with your dark color. Just heads up. Okay, so I'm going to start with the gray. And I'm going to use a magic ring. You can use whatever ring starting method you prefer. And we'll do chain 4. That counts as a double crochet and a chain 1. I'm going to do a total of 8 double crochet in the ring. So that counts as 1. I will do 7 more, and each one is going to be separated by a chain 1. So double crochet, chain 1, until I have 8. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then I'll join it to my starting chain. Again, I'm going to make sure that I skip the chain 1. So this is the double crochet here. This is the chain 1 in between, and this is the 3rd stitch of my starting chain, which would be the top of that double crochet. So I'll join there, and then chain 4. Place a stitch marker. And as usual, whenever I use a magic ring, I'm going to weave that end in substantially so that I'm sure that it's not going to come out at all. Because magic rings do actually have a little bit of a tendency to come unwound if you don't weave them in well enough. So just make sure you're aware of that. Okay, and now I'm going to get my purple yarn. I'm going to start here with a slip knot and then chain 8. I'm just going to pull up a loop here just to give me some space to work with. I'm going to weave this in and out. So I'm going to want to end up with my working yarn just to the left of the working yarn of my gray. And I'm going to start by going over this center post here. So I'm going to go over, under, and I'm just going to weave this through and try to keep my starting chain pretty straight here with the purple. I'm not worrying about it too much, but it's always nice to have it nice and straight. I could be using my crochet hook to help with this, but... Okay, so now I'm all the way back up to where I started, and I'm going to join my circle. Get my hook back in here. I'm just going to join with a slip stitch here. And then chain 4. So you can see that my working yarn for purple is just to the left of my working yarn for gray, and that's exactly where I want it. And it's going over where the working yarn is, and then alternating every stitch. So that is our setup. And like many things, that is kind of the most difficult part. And then I'll just kind of pull this a little bit just to make sure it's kind of even, just for appearances really more than anything else. All right, so still with the purple on our hook, I'm actually going to add one more chain here. I'm going to keep going around, and what I'm going to do is double crochets separated by chain 2. So there are going to be 8 double crochets, so I'm going to do basically 1 to the left of each gray stitch. So that's 1, and all of them are going to work from the front for this pattern, for this row. So double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. So this is now just to the left of that gray stitch, but it still worked in the front. So it's really 2 double crochets in each section of the purple. So double crochet, chain 2, and I'm just going to do this all the way around. Okay, so now when I join, I'm going to put my working yarn of gray in the front because I want it on the front on the next round. Then I'm going to join to my starting chain. Keep in mind that you did chain 2 in between, so here's the top of the double crochet, chain 1, chain 2, and the top of our starting double crochet. We'll join and chain 4 and place a stitch marker. So at the end of this round it should look like this. Little kind of medallion looking thing. And there's a point during this pattern where I think it actually makes like a really cool circular coaster. It doesn't really start looking like an octagon until you get maybe about halfway through. In the beginning rounds it really just looks like a circle. So I think that's kind of cool because I've never seen circular interlocking crochet either. It's kind of different and unique. Moving on to the next round, we'll get our gray back on our hook. And we're going to want our B color in front for the next round, so we'll put that in front now. So we had chained 4, and that is what we want because we're just going to have chain 1 spaces in between each of the stitches for this round. So we started in the front. Now we're going to do a back double crochet. Well, let me just tell you kind of the pattern. So we're going to do double crochets in each of the chain 2 spaces and in each of the double crochets. So we're going to be increasing, we're doubling our stitches. So we're going to do a back double crochet around this first chain 2 space. And then a back double crochet in the double crochet. Now another back in the chain 2 space. And now a front. So this one is coming in between these 2 purple stitches. Reach through, grab the gray stitch and pull it to the front. Now we're going to repeat around, so we're doing back around the chain, back stitch, back around the chain, front stitch, back, 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 front, all the way around. When you get to the end of the round, the last front stitch, so back, 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 front is our start. So we don't need to do another front stitch. Then we'll join to our starting chain. Remember to leave a chain 1 space in between each. So this pattern is a little different from the center out interlocking squares I did because each round the A color and the B color have the same number of double crochet. They're going to have different numbers of chain stitches, but the numbers of double crochet is the same for each A and B row. So 1A, 1B, whatever. So I just did a chain 4 and I'll place a stitch marker here. And it should look like this. Okay, for the B row, it's going to be very similar. We are going to do a stitch in each double crochet and a stitch around each chain. However, the chains in between are a little bit different. So we started in the front and we had just done a chain 4 for the working chain. I'm going to actually add one more chain here so that it's a double crochet and a chain 2. Now I'm going to do a back double crochet around this chain. Make sure you get in between these 2 gray stitches because just like other interlocking, you want a gray in between each purple or blue or whatever color. So back around the chain and then chain 1. Now a front in the double crochet, and chain 2, back around the chain, and chain 1, front in the double crochet, chain 2, back around the chain, and chain 1. So every time you work in the double crochet, you're going to chain 2. Every time you work around the chain, you're going to chain 1 in between. We're going to do this all the way around. And when you get to the end of the round, then again, you're going to want the gray to be in the back this time. So make sure you put that in the right spot. And here, we're going to join to our starting chain, remembering that we did chain 2 in between. So we'll make sure we skip enough stitches there. Chain 4, and place a stitch marker. So we should have 16 purple double crochets. And at this point, I think this is maybe the easiest row to get your stitches a little mixed up on. So the thing that I like to do is to look actually at the back. And if your gray stitches that show here are alternating 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, then you probably are fine. You probably skipped the gray stitches properly. So that's my advice, is to check the back after the end of this row, because that can be helpful to make sure that you're on the right track. All right, we need our gray back on our hook. Our B color is going to be in the front. And now this round we're going to do all back stitches, and all of our stitches are going to be worked in the double crochets on the row below, not into the chain spaces. So keep that in mind. So we started with 1 back stitch, and these all are going to have chain 1 spaces in between. The gray rows always have chain 1 spaces, never chain 2. So our first stitch was in the back. We're going to do 2 back stitches in the next gray stitch. And again, we're having chain 1s in between, and then another one in that same stitch, again with a chain 1. Now a single back stitch in the next gray, and we're just going to keep going around. We're going to alternate 2 backs, 1 back, all the way around. So again, we're going to increase by another 8 stitches. All right, so that was a chain 4, and this is what it looks like after this round. So it's really kind of framing out that purple nicely. And again, you should now have 24 double crochets in that round. And now we're going to go on to the B color, which in my case is purple. And so at the end of this B color round, we're also going to have 24 double crochets. So the number of double crochets is the same, just the number of chain stitches that we use is different. Okay, so we started in the front here. I'm going to add 1 other chain because I needed a chain 2 instead of a chain 1. I'm going to do a back around the chain, and again you have to make sure that you're kind of getting in the right spot. So I need to go in between these 2 gray double crochet because there's going to be a gray stitch in between every purple stitch. So there's a back, now a front, and then a back. And after this one, I'm going to chain 2 instead of chaining 1. Okay. Now I'll do a front around the chain. Now I'll do a back and then a front. And after this one, I want to chain 2 instead of a chain 1. So this is basically back to where we started. Now I'll do a back around the chain. I'm going to do this whole round on camera just because it's a little wonky. Now a front, then a back with a chain 2 instead of a chain 1. Front around the chain, a back, a front, and a chain 2 after that front. Now a back around the chain, front, and a back, and chain 2 after this stitch, now a front around the chain, and a back, and a front, chain 2 after this stitch, back around the chain, front, back, and then a chain 2, front around the chain, and then a back, we want this gray stitch to be in the back, and we'll join our starting chain, remembering that there was a chain 2 here. So we'll skip both of those stitches. Join and chain 4. Now eventually as we work here, the places where you have the extra stitches, either the increases or the extra chain stitches, is where your corners are going to end up on the octagon. But like I said, you don't really see it very well here. And this is actually the place where I think it would make a really cute little coaster. So this last round we were just alternating front, back, front, back, front, back. It just feels weird because some of those are around chains and some of those are worked into stitches, but it makes really a pretty smooth circle going all the way around. And I just think that's a really cute little coaster. So if you wanted to stop there, it's totally mug-sized or cup-sized, and it's just fun. We'll get our gray back on our hook. We actually want our bee color to be in the back for this round. This is another row that feels a little wonky. Honestly, a lot of them feel a little wonky in this pattern because of those odd increases. So it takes maybe a little more concentration than a regular interlocking crochet pattern, but I think the result is super worth it. Okay, so I started in the back. I'm going to work another back stitch in that double crochet. And again, on the gray, all of my stitches will have a chain 1. I'm never going to use chain 2. Now I'm going to do a front stitch around the chain space. Now 2 backs and then a front. Now a back around the chain space. And then a front. And that is our repeat section. So I'm going to do that again. Do 2 backs and then a front space. So front around the chain space. So back, back, front around the space. Now we'll do back, back, front. Back around the chain space. And a front. Again, we're increasing by 8 stitches on this round. So each round we're always increasing by 8 stitches. And we'll do that again. Back, back. Front around the chain space. Back, back, front. Back around the chain space. And front. One more time, back, back. Front around the chain space. Back, back, front. Back around the chain space. And a front stitch to finish the round. And we'll join to our starting chain. So we should have 32 double crochet in this round. Chain 4, and place a stitch marker. Then we need to get our B color back on our hook. So we started in the back. We're actually going to do all back stitches this round. But again, we're going to have some that are around the chain. So we started in the back. We're going to do a back around the chain, making sure we're on this side of that gray stitch. And then a chain 2. So every time we do a back stitch around the chain, we're going to chain 2 this round. Now we're going to do 3 backs. Working into the double crochets for these. And then back around the chain again. Chain 2. Then 3 backs, again making sure I'm getting in the right place, so there's a gray stitch in between each purple. So that's 3 backs, and then we'll do another back around the chain. Chain 2, 3 backs, and then back around the chain. And we're just going to keep doing this all the way around. Chain 2 when you do the back around the chain. And 3 backs. Back around the chain. When you get to the end of the round, you'll finish it off with just 2 more back stitches after the last back around a chain. We want the gray to be in the back. And we'll join to our starting chain. This time we only had a chain 1 in this space, so we only need to skip the 1. then chain 4, and place a stitch marker. I know it's maybe a little bit hard to see the purple just because it's so dark, but hopefully you can see it okay. Alright, so that is what it's looking like so far. We're getting bigger, and pretty soon it's really going to start, you're going to start seeing the corners for the octagon a little bit more. You can already start to see it's getting a little pointy, so we're starting to form that octagon shape. We want our B color in the back for the next round, so we'll put it behind and get our A color back on our hook. All of these stitches for this round are going to be in the back. So we started in the back. We're going to do a back stitch, and then we'll do 2 backs in the next stitch for a corner here. Okay, so we did an increase there. We worked 2 double crochets in the same stitch, and we're going to do 3 backs. And then we'll increase again by doing 2 backs in this stitch. We're still having chain 1s in between even when we do the increase. We're just working those 2 stitches in the same place. So we're going to continue like this all the way around. 3 regular backs and then an increase. When you get around to the starting, you're gonna, after the last increase, have just 1 more back stitch to finish the round. And then we can join to our starting chain. Chain 4. And place a stitch marker. Now we're really starting to see this octagon shape, and you see it more with the gray than you do with the purple because you're doing those increases with the gray that you're not doing in the same way with the purple. You are increasing the purple, but it just doesn't quite have the same sharp corners as the gray does. So you just see the increases more with the gray. Okay, and we'll get our A color back on our hook. Sorry, I meant our B color back on our hook. Okay, so our first stitch was in the back. We're going to do another back stitch, and then chain 2. We'll do a front stitch around the chain, then 4 back stitches, or after the 4th back stitch, it's going to be a chain 2. Then we're going to do that again, front around the chain, and then 4 back stitches, after the 4th back stitch, chain 2. And we'll continue like this around. When you get back around to the start, you'll end with 2 backs after the last front stitch there. And remember, we want our gray, our A color to be in front for the next round, so we'll make sure that is in front. And join here. chain 4, and place a stitch marker. So each of those front stitches is happening at one of the corners of the octagon. Doing our B color in back. So we started in the front. We'll do 2 more front stitches. And then we'll do a back stitch around the chain. It's pretty easy to remember where to do it on this round because you're going to do it behind each purple front stitch. So we'll do a back stitch behind around this chain here. And we'll do 5 front stitches. Make sure you get this first stitch here. Kind of hides back there a little bit. And then again, we're going to do a back in this chain behind the purple. We'll just continue around like that, 5 fronts, then a back around the chain. When you get back here, you'll have just 2 fronts after the last chain stitch. And we'll get our B collar back on our hook. We started in the back, we're going to do 1 more back stitch. Now we're going to do a front around the chain. Oops. Chain 2, and then a front stitch. So these 2 are basically in the same spot, just one's around the chain, one is around the actual, or into the actual double crochet. So that's where our chain 2 is happening on this round, is right in that front spot. Okay, now we'll do 4 back stitches. Oops. Again, we're going to do front around the chain here. Chain 2 and a front. So we're going to continue like this all the way around. When you get back to the start, make sure your gray is in the back, and you'll have just 2 back stitches after the corner, and then you'll join. Alright, in this round we're going to want our B color to be in front. All of these stitches with our A color are going to be worked from the back. So we started in the back, we're going to do 2 more regular back stitches. And then in this corner stitch, it's right behind our purple corner here, we're going to do 2 back stitches in this one. So here we did an increase, we did 2 back stitches there, still having a chain 1 in between. And now we're going to do 5 backs, and then again 2 backs in the corner stitch, all the way around, 5 backs, 2 in the corner, until we get back to the front. And then we'll finish with 2 backs before we join. Alright, we're going to want our A color in the back. We'll get our B color back on our hook. We have 4 rounds left, 2 with each color, so we are kind of getting close to done here. Okay, we started here in the front. I'm going to do 2 backs. Now we'll do a chain 2 here instead of a chain 1, and a front around the chain. Okay, so now from the corner we're going to do 2 backs, 2 fronts, 2 backs. instead of a chain 1, we'll do chain 2, and then front around the chain for the corner. So we'll repeat that for each side. So after the corner, you've got 2 back, 2 front, 2 back, chain 2, front around the chain. When you get back to the starting, after your last corner, you'll just have 2 backs and 1 front before you join. Make sure you remember when you join that you want the gray to be in the back. We want our B color in the back, and get our A color back on our hook. Okay, so our first stitch was in the back. Now we're going to do front, back, front. And we'll do a back around the chain. Again, this is right on the corner, so right behind that purple corner stitch, back around the chain. And now we're going to alternate front, back, front, back, front, back, front until the next corner. So we'll go. Make sure we get this first stitch here. Front, back, front, back, front, back, and front. And then once again, we're going to do a back stitch around the chain at the corner. So this whole round, we're really just alternating stitches. Whenever you're at the corner, it's a back stitch around the chain, and then front, back, front, back, front, back, front, back stitch around the chain. When we get back to the start, you'll just join your starting chain. This is going to be our last round for our B color. And then we've got one more round for A color. All right, so this one, it's going to be back stitches all the way around again, so that is pretty easy. So we started in the back. Now we'll do 2 more backs here. Chain 2, and now we'll do a back over the chain. So this is right before that front corner stitch. Back stitch over that chain. And we'll do 7 back stitches. Chain 2, oops, and back over the chain, and then we'll continue like that. So 7 backs, chain 2 after the 7th, and back over the chain, and continue like that all the way around until you get back to the front and join. The gray needs to start in the back on the next round, so make sure it's behind. Alright, this is our last round. I've cut off my B color, so I just have 1 yarn attached now. Okay, so our first stitch we started in the back. Now I'm going to go back, front, back. Now I'll do 2 fronts in the next stitch. This is our corner here. Now after the corner, I'm going to do back then front. Three backs. Now front, back. Now a corner again, do 2 front in the corner. Okay, so we'll repeat this for each side. After the corner, we'll do back front, 3 back, front back, then a corner. After the corner, when you get back to the end, you'll do the corner, then you'll do back, front, and then just 1 more back before you join, and that will be the end. So this is what your finished square should look like. This one hasn't been tied off yet, of course, but here you go. Pretty cool, if I do say so myself. It's like a wheel or a gear, or I don't know. You guys probably know by now that I'm a fan of like geometric shapes and whatnot. So this is fun. I'll make another video to show you how to do the square that'll go in between the octagons to make the blanket, and then you'll be able to make it as big as you want. If you are using the same yarn that I am, it took me just over 100 grams total to make 2 hexagons, or I mean octagons. So if I had 2 full skeins, because each of these is 100 grams, so if I had 2 full skeins, I could make almost 4 hexagons. So if you're trying to get an idea for, sorry, I keep calling them hexagons, octagons. If you're trying to get an idea for how much yarn, a little more than 4 skeins per every, sorry, a little more than 4 octagons for every 2 skeins of yarn. Okay, happy crocheting!